right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Ali, Hafaday, Tirawami, Mogetin, Rananim, Ranalem, Kaselelie, Lenwo, Yokwe, Talofa, Aloha, Mabuhay, and hello. Welcome to the Region 18 and Region 19's presentation on assessing multilingual learners easier than you think, featuring Margo Gottlieb, Lee Pangelinan, and Lisa Emwalu. We welcome you today. We are very, very happy to have all of you join us this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are around the world, for this really important webinar on multilingualism and assessment. We have a lot of great things in store, and we are so happy to share with you, as well as learn from you. I would like to recognize our director for Region 18, who is in our audience, Emerson Odango. I want to thank you for allowing us to be able to share this important information with our participants around the Pacific, around the world, and dialogue and learn from one another. And my name is Lynette Villagomez, and I'm the Deputy Director for Region 18. And I'm so happy to be one of your hosts today. With me, my co-host is Miss Paulina Urupi, and I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Benalim, everyone. This is Paulina Urupi Sandy. I'm also a member of the RC18 team, and very excited to be part of this webinar.
Thank you so much, Paulina. So for today, our agenda today, we have welcome and sign in. So for our sign in sheets, you should have seen the link for the sign in as you were waiting in the waiting room. And Paulina also shared it in the chat box. Please make sure that you sign in. We want to make sure that we have your email. And another important thing is that we are going to be raffling off 5 of the latest books from Margo Gottlieb. And these books are treasures with so much information and a lot of practical information to work with our students in the classrooms. And so we are going to be raffling 5 sets of that. So you need to stay for the duration of the webinar because we want you to be present to win. So we're going to be doing that towards the end. We're going to be talking about forming educator and student language and cultural portraits. We're going to be identifying the advantages of bi and multilingualism, as well as envisioning assessment in multiple languages and the raffle. And then finally, we would like to ask you to fill out the participant activity feedback form, of which we will share a link with you. For today's objectives, we will be engaging with education practitioners who live and practice multilingualism and multiculturalism in the Pacific. So today we have 2 Pacific practitioners who are going to be sharing their experiences when it comes to working with students who come from multicultural and multilingual backgrounds. Participants will have identified their place on the multilingual and multicultural continua. We're going to share stories and testimonials about the value of multilingualism and multiculturalism in instruction and assessment. And then we're going to be differentiating between the assessment and testing and among assessments as, for, and off learning. And so one thing different about this webinar is that we have an expert in the field, but we're coupling it with the practitioners who are in the classrooms with real students. So this is going to be so much fun, and we hope that you're going to enjoy it and take back what you've learned and share it with your colleagues and practice as well. All right, turning it over to my co-host, Paulina.
I'd like to introduce one of our key presenters for today's webinar, Dr. Margo Gottlieb, who is a co-founder and lead developer of WIDA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her webinar today is based on her most recent books: Classroom Assessment in Multiple Languages, a handbook for teachers, and its companion, Assessment in Multiple Languages, a handbook for school and district leaders. Margo has fond memories of working with educators in the Pacific, offering professional development in the CNMI, being a visiting professor in Guam, and helping in the design of English language proficiency standards in American Samoa. Throughout her educational career as a teacher, educator, and researcher, Margo has been a staunch advocate for multilingual learners, their families, and educators. And then moving on to one of our Pacific education practitioners is Ms. Lee Pangelinan, who has broad experience having taught learners from elementary school to the collegiate level. She has taught in various classroom settings, interacting with students online to facilitating learners face to face. She has been a mentor to new teachers and veterans alike. Lee has dedicated 17 years of her career teaching first grade at Kagman Elementary. She has spent the last 3 years teaching first grade in the second Manuki or the Chamorro Immersion Program. She has a master's degree in international teaching from Birmingham State College and a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Northern Mariana College. And then we have Ms. Lisa Emwalu, who is currently a kindergarten Carolinian immersion teacher at Kagman Elementary School. She received her bachelor's degree in elementary education at the University of Hawaii, West Oahu. She started her work in the immersion program as a kindergarten teacher, and her first batch of students are now in the 4th grade. In her spare time, Lisa loves to garden, hike, dance, and make mayat, crown of flowers called likatutu, traditional Carolinian bead necklaces. And now may I turn it over to our esteemed colleague, Dr. Margo Gottlieb.
Hello, everyone. It is such an honor to be with all of you today. I really wish it could be face-to-face, but can't help it. I think I am thousands of miles away from most of you, but you always are in my heart. So now that you know a little bit about us, let's dive into the power of portraits. Educator and student, their language and cultural portraits really provide us some insight into our identities, how our interactions with one another help build relationships. And knowing who we are is going to help us connect with others. And it's going to be the lens through which we can see the world. So educator portraits enable us to situate ourselves in classrooms and in schools as facilitators, as guides, as partners, while student portraits allow us to connect and personalize teaching and learning for our students. So with that, Lynette is going to launch into a couple of polls to see how you might be forming your own portraits. Lynette, your turn.
Please put in the chat box, where are you from? And we'll give you guys about a minute to populate the chat box. And during the registration, we did see, we have folks from around the Pacific who have registered. We have folks from New York. We have also folks from American Samoa who've registered, RMI, US Virgin Islands, Hawaii. So from all over the world, and then in some parts of the states like California, we have folks also from Georgia who've registered. So we will see a wide range of folks from different areas. And so this is just so awesome that we're able to learn from one another.
And it's so nice to see this heterogeneous mix of folks from the mainland all the way to Hawaii and Guam and Micronesia, Saipan, Guam, the Philippines, but living in Virginia. So you all seem to have roots in the Pacific somehow. California, closer than I am. I happen to be in Florida right now. Wonderful mix of people.
All right. So poll number 2 is, the question is, I understand and or speak A, 1 language, B, 2 languages, C, 3 languages, D, 4 languages, and E, 5 or more languages. So quickly, write letter A through E in the chat box.
What a tremendously multilingual group. It's so wonderful to see.
Most of our participants shared that they can either understand and or speak 2 or 3 languages, some up to 4. Wow, amazing. I wish I had that.
Yeah, I would have liked to have been a polyglot too.
Yes. All right. And then the last poll is, how many cultures do you interact with on a daily basis? A, 1 culture, B, 2 cultures, C, 3 cultures, D, 4 cultures, and E, 5 or more cultures. So if you can quickly write A through E in the chat box. Okay, so we got E. Wow. Check this out, Margo.
Well, according to the poll, more than half of you are exposed to and interact with 5 or more cultures daily. I mean, what a wonderful life you are living. It's just terrific. So what we can conclude here is basically multilingualism and multiculturalism, in essence, is descriptive of who you are. It's really a part of you. It's your identity. It's how you act. It's been shaped by your environment, by your interactions with others. And so here are 3 kind of, I would say, influences that help shape multilingualism and multiculturalism. First of all, we've seen that all of you have been exposed to multiple languages and cultures. So you've had opportunities to live and learn and form a world view of people. The second one is that you have had access to very rich funds of linguistic and cultural knowledge, and you've accrued that knowledge through homes, communities, through all the peoples who have been part of your life. And then thirdly, you've had opportunities to practice, or you have developed practices of language use, and you are instilled into your cultural traditions. You share experiences and perspectives. And in essence, you've been learning from each other all your lives through your multilingual and multicultural lens. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to dive just a little bit deeper. So a person, in my eyes, can never be completely monolingual or monocultural if you're living on Earth. But actually, each of you represents an individual space in a very long continuum. So that's what we're going to explore next. When it says what linguistic and cultural knowledge of your elders has impacted you, I am blessed, and I'm sure that you are too, that you have had the fortune of often living with multi-generational families. And so think about how your extended families have really helped shape your linguistic and cultural portrait. So next, Lynette is going to launch yet another activity for you.
So at this point, we would like to ask you to put in the chat box number 1, number 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on where you think you are on this continuum of monolingual, and then 5 multilingual. So pick a number of where you think you are on this continuum and put it in the chat box.
And I'm just going to insert, if you're not a solid 2, but a 2.3 or 2.8, that's okay too, because you may not land specifically on that number.
All right, we see a lot of folks who are at the far end of multilingualism, a lot of 4s and 5s. We have some in the 3s and maybe one at 2.5, but we see most of the people responding, the participants responding towards multilingualism versus monolingual. I'm going to launch another slide activity. And this one is on, did it move? Monocultural to multicultural. So same thing on looking at the continua or the continuum, select your number between 1 and 5 and put it in the chat box of where you think you are on this continuum, monocultural, multicultural. And Dr. Gottlieb, we're seeing a lot of people in 3s, 4s, and 5s, more towards multicultural.
What a wonderful audience. Are we lucky?
You're very lucky.
I just want you to realize that this is just a bird's eye view. It's a snapshot of how you consider yourself in the world around you as monolingual to multicultural, from multicultural to monocultural, and all the maturations in between. Understanding that monolingualism, multiculturalism, multilingualism, the whole contingency is really part of a context. And it's the context, the persons who you're interacting with, the topic of discussion, those really help solidify where you would fall on a scale. So for example, if you're talking about multiple regression analysis, which is a statistical procedure, oh my gosh, I would be way over on the left-hand side, but you asked me to interact with my friends on a daily basis, I move all the way to the other side. So understanding that you position yourself on the scale isn't a fixed number, but is very much contingent on where you are at that point in time and with whom you're with. And so thinking about that, if you look at your degree of multilingualism, multiculturalism, where you're from, the people you interact with, you're starting to form your own educator portraits. And Paulina is going to explain a little bit more about that.
Kilisota Margo Tiro fan peri mehayon ay kapongeri kan it may fitikits 50 tickets panat say webinar can so basically what I was doing is paying my respect and greetings to everyone in 2 languages, and that's Polapis, my native tongue, and Chukis, a sister language of Polapis, which I also speak. And the reason I choose these 2 languages to speak in for this slide is because that's who I am. Whenever somebody asks me, who are you or where you're from, the first thing that comes to mind is I'm from Polap, and I'm from Polap or from Chuk. And depending on who the audience is or who I'm speaking with, if they're from the region, like from Micronesia or Pacific, then I would start with that, I'm from Polap. But if there are people in the audience who are not familiar with Micronesia or so, then I'll Chuk, and then expanding out to the FSM. And now I'd like to turn it over to our 2 colleagues, educators, Ms. Lee Pangelinan and Lisa Emwalu.
Half a day. So just like Paulina in our Chamorro has mentioned earlier, in our Chamorro and our Carolinian immersion classes, we have students with diverse cultures and ethnicities. Our classes of diverse students are from Palau, Chuk, Korean, Kiribati, the Philippines, and Pohnpei and Yap.
Sorry. Okay, Ranatim Tirawami. Okay, so going back to our diverse population in the classroom, they come with different cultures, different languages, and they share it in the classroom. such as greeting in their language and sharing their favorite food. Yes, in the next slide, you will witness what I'm talking about.
At this time, we're going to see some student portraits.
Melody Olamaya. My name is Teta Welch, and I'm from Kiribati. And
What grade are you?
I am 4th grade. And
What's your favorite food?
my favorite food is teka.
What is teka?
Eh,
Ir.
eh,
What is ir?
fish.
Okay.
Sahu uma escuela because I love speaking tomorrow at school, and when I get home I get to speak to my mom tomorrow. Ngang Lina Inolan 2nd grade, Ngang Fin Polowat.
Do you think it's important to speak your language?
Yes, because you won't understand anybody at your house or anywhere. Ako umuskwela. I like coming to school to learn more stuff from teacher. Ako umuskwela sa because I like reading different stories.
Annyeonghaseyo, Lesser Momai. Ite Mikan Igo. My mom is Korean and my dad is Carolinian. I am in 3rd grade. In Carolinian immersion, when I was kinder, and I like when we played the uke and go on field trips.
Zahu umaskwela. I like doing science because I get to mix in the colors and Amariza make Betty. Itenge sinis kapet oko.
What grade are you, Zinis?
I am kinder.
All right, so as you can see, our students come from different backgrounds, and these are students who are in the same classroom for most of the day and learn from one another. And so just as our portraits, our cultural portraits that we worked on earlier, these children also have their own cultural portraits. Okay. Turning it over to Miss Margo, Dr. Margo.
So I hope by now, by having an opportunity to form your own linguistic and cultural portrait, and then see the uniqueness of each and every student that you just had a wonderful opportunity to listen to, I hope it's become quite evident the myriad of benefits of being bi or multilingual and multicultural. And so that's what we're going to be exploring next. How elders have helped shape the dearth of knowledge of each of us over time, and what we can do with our students, given their portraits, to extend their multilingualism and multiculturalism, whether they are formally instructed in a language other than English or not. They are still multilingual and multicultural. You can't strip that away from them. That's who they are. It's part of their identity. So I think we've talked about the advantages of bilingualism and multilingualism. Of bi and multiculturalism. Can you name some too? I think you were going to chime in now.
Okay, so in our immersion classes, we value the interaction between our manamcos, the elders, and the kids. So we take field trips to the Manamco centers, and sometimes the elders will come and visit the students at school. Students will interact uh, with the elders and speak the Chamorro and Carolinian language. They sing and dance together, and then the elders will share their childhood stories, like their experience during World War II. You want to add on to that, Miss Lee?
All right, so I want to share this school year's testimony, one of our parents. So this school year, I have a student that transferred in from Guam. Her father wasn't really fond about the fact that his only one and only daughter and granddaughter are both moving off island, coming to Saipan, away from him. However, after being in the immersion class, they were able to bond at a different level because they are able to speak in the Chamorro language. Now, the grandfather is always looking forward to their daily video chat to hear about how her day was at school. The granddaughter, grandpa always also shared that his daughter and granddaughter moving to Saipan was the best decision after all. Thank you.
I think these stories really reinforce the notion that bilingualism and multilingualism, biculturalism, multiculturalism are indeed inherent in everything we do. And so if we go to the next slide, what we have done over time is that we're expanding the notion of who these students are and embracing their multilingualism by calling them multilingual learners. That is, it's children and youth in pre-K through 12 settings who are constantly or have been or will be exposed to multiple languages and cultures. So by definition, each one of these students who you listen to is multilingual indeed. And one of the reasons why the term multilingualism and multilingual learners is taking hold is that it accentuates the assets and the resources that our children are bringing to school from home, rather than really honing in on what they can't do, which is English in large part. However, if we look at multilingual learners, they are very broad in scope. And if you go to the next slide, we still talk about English learners. If you consider the big orange circle the sun, that encompasses all our multilingual learners, each and every one of your students. But within that, there's a nested figure forming of English learners. And indeed, they're a recognized subset of multilingual learners. And this subgroup has been labeled by the US Department of Education. And in the United States, in the mainland, also in Guam and the CNMI, students who have this label called English learners are qualifying for additional language support. And so we need to keep that also intact. But within that big pink circle, there's also all these little circles. We tend to label students so much, but we can't forget that each one of these students is an individual, and there might be students with individualized education programs or IEPs. There might be others who are gifted and talented, some who are newcomers, like the child who just came from Korea, or students, older students who tend to have interrupted schooling along the way. So just as we have formulated individual student portraits, if we keep on diving into it, we can get more and more detailed as to who these children are and what they can do. Remembering always to think about them in the more positive rather than pejorative sense. So we want to accentuate the strengths of multilingual learners. And so I think it's time. Hopefully this will work, Lynette. Do you want to try it out?
All right. So at this time, we are going to launch a Padlet. And so the question on the Padlet is, what do you see as the advantages of being multilingual and or multicultural? So we want to hear from you. And so if you can use your cell phone and use the QR code to open up the Padlet, or you can click on the link that has been put in the chat by Miss Paulina, and open up the Padlet and type in your response to what do you see as the advantages of being multilingual and or multicultural. This is great. We have several responses already on the Padlet, and I want to thank everyone for your participation. So we want to make sure this is as interactive as possible. So what do you see as the advantages of being multilingual and multicultural? And we will give you about 3 minutes to respond, as well as read through other people's responses. And please also feel free to respond to other people's comments. Some of you are already taking advantage of that, and this is great, learning from one another. Wow, we have a lot of responses here. Great.
What wonderful insights that each of you have had. It's just beautiful to watch it and to see it.
Okay. Give everybody a few more seconds. Make sure that you're able to add your response. All right. So we're going to read through some of these and just quickly talk about it. So we have someone who said, resilient. Huge advantage of being multilingual and multicultural is the ability to adapt and thrive no matter where you go. This is.
And I'm going to chime in saying that, and that in essence really helps students' social and emotional development.
We have someone who wrote, you learn about the world from multiple perspectives all the time. You use different languages to express thoughts in different contexts with different people. Thank you. The advantages of being multilingual and multicultural is being able to address the needs of those learners in the classroom one way or another.
So you see the direct connection there. Good.
It shapes the way I think and view the world. I can hold multiple truths and perspectives at once without being confused.
And that's a myth that you just defunct.
Yes.
Or debunked.
Build strong connections to diverse communities, understand multiple perspectives. We see this trend about understanding where we are in the world and how we're connected. Connections to my elders and ancestors. Speaking in my family's languages keeps me constantly connected to my elders and ancestors. I actively reconnect to them on a daily basis. Really important, because we are losing in some places, they're losing their culture. their language as well. So it's very important to reconnect. I like the emphasis on different contexts. It reminds me too of switching between different language and codes at different times for different purpose. Code switching, right? We've heard of this. And so these are great, great responses. Anyone want to share? Really want to share what they wrote? Any volunteers? All right. Silence is golden, but we want to give the opportunity for people to share if they are willing. Okay, let's go
So
back.
Lynette, I'm sorry, this is Rita.
Hi,
I
Dr.
wanted to, hi, this is excellent. I really like this topic and, learning a lot from everyone else. But I wanted to say that one of the things that I feel is a great advantage of multilingualism and multiculturalism is that it builds that capacity where there's a gap, you're able to fill in that gap with the resources that you need to continually make an impact or change with teaching, learning, and anything else in the community. So I really like the fact that you are able to allow us to share our thoughts on this because, we're learning a lot from others too. Just wanted to add that in.
Thank you.
What you said is so important because one, to me, you become empowered and you become an agent of your own learning. And what I've gleaned from this kind of activity, as I hope you have, is that language learning is social in nature. It isn't something you find in a book. It's your interaction with others, being able to gain these multiple perspectives, having a sense of your place in the world. All this sense making is going to help your students grow.
All right, thank you. So give me just a sec to switch back to our PowerPoint.
And I can chime in and say, I hope that through what we're doing in this webinar, that you're able to witness firsthand through the eyes of your students, your own multilingual learners, their parents, even other teachers, how multilingualism and multiculturalism can bolster student self-efficacy. And with self-efficacy comes motivation. With motivation comes increased achievement. And so there's a robust body of research. We're waiting to the end, just before we take a little break, to share with you some of the seminal pieces of research and the literature that's going to substantiate what you already know and have been sharing with us. So Lynette, I think we need to go back to the PowerPoint.
All right, and we are back to the PowerPoint. And at this point, we would like to share some parent perspectives of their children who are in the immersion classroom. Can you guys see the video? I'll just play it. Can you guys see the screen already?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna play it.
Language.
Yeah, he does. So every time he comes home from school, he would, Mom, ask me the colors. So I would say green. He's gonna tell me the color, and then sometimes I would say, no, that's not. He said, yes, you want to ask grandma? Yeah.
Really?
So he's really good at all of the colors. It's just a pronunciation that sometimes he has struggle, like he laughs about it. So,
But grandma
Ezra,
is
what's
there.
blue? Like he has a hard time, and I would say arara, alaw. Like he would.
I think it's the R.
Yeah,
The
and I
rolling.
would tell him, you have to roll your tongue. Or he was like, Mom, what's this? And I was like, I don't know, what's that? Buyaya kumun. And I was like, oh wow! And then I was so proud of him. And I was like, what else? What else? I forgot what he told me, but man, I see that you're doing a really good job.
So that was just a video from a perspective of a parent. And so Miss Lee, Miss Lisa, would you like to add more information to this? Talk about your parent and their perspectives with what you guys are doing in the classroom?
Yes. Okay, so this is just one of the positive feedback we've been receiving from parents. And you can see in the video how she lights up when she noticed that her son can speak the language, uh, which is, may I use the restroom? And the other thing that we have also noticed is how it bonds the family together. The kids and their grandparents, they would go back to their grandparents to verify or to clarify whatever they're learning in their classrooms. And we're not able to launch some of the videos, but parents shared how they come home and teach their siblings whatever they learn in the classroom. They come home and teach the siblings, and that right there speaks very volume to whatever we're doing or attempting to do here, the bonding with the grandparents and teaching their siblings. Well, why do I have to speak my language? Well, I couldn't have said it better than what one of the students has shared, that she needs to speak the language because to understand the people at home. So my language is also referred to as home language or mother tongue, which when we talk about mother, it brings closer to our heart. It's something that we cherish and we should be proud of to speak. Thank you.
So we're finally transitioned into the hardcore research behind all these wonderful testimonials, which I think it just brings joy to me. But more than 40 years, I'm showing you the most recent, just little snippets of what the rest of the world has been doing in terms of hardcore investigation on monolingualism and versus multilingualism and monoculturalism versus multiculturalism. And guess what? If you are bilingual, multilingual, and multicultural, you are advantaged. You have so much to offer, and schooling is going to reinforce. Schooling is going to not only help you gain more deeper learning, but more profound learning. And so just, if you just look at that, your literacy is going to expand enormously. You're going to be able to use one language and transfer that to another language. That's been proven over and over and over again. The fact that we are so sensitive now in this age of the pandemic to social emotional learning. And Bialystok, who's a Canadian, has researched this for years. And what she says is bilinguals consistently outperform their monolingual counterparts on tasks requiring executive control. That's self-regulation. That's exactly what we're talking about. And the last one is that if we, in fact, can design, develop, maintain high quality, long-term bilingual programs, it is going to help all students who are partaking in those programs. And those programs happen to be dual language programs where students are exposed to and gain access to multiple languages and cultures. So here's the research that substantiates what we have heard for the last hour. Well, hopefully you will have seen that by forming your own individual educator kind of portraits, you've seen the portraits now of students, how you and your students can have an impact on teaching and learning. And that's going to move us into our discussion on assessment, because teaching and learning is going to impact directly how you approach assessment. And that's what we're going to spend the next hour. But now you have a sense of what you are bringing to the assessment situation, where your space is amongst your peers. So we want to hear from you, as always. This is called a chat blast. That is, you're going to have about 30 seconds to think about 1 or 2 words or a phrase of what comes to mind when you hear the word assessment. So I'm going to give you a minute, and then when I say blast, at the same time, everyone's going to put their answer into chat, and you're going to see a free flow of what everyone has to say. So think about it. Have a couple of words. Are you ready? Open up that chat and blast it. Okay, so Tess seems to win out. Juanita, you know what assessment means because that's exactly how you translate it, sitting next to someone. But here, just observing, is that a kind of assessment? Absolutely. Evaluating, that goes beyond assessment, putting a value on something or judging assessment data is evaluation. Just gathering information is part of it. A quiz, sure. At one point in time, checking understanding, giving feedback, data, summative, formative, words we seem to live by, huh? Wonderful response. I'm going to go back to something that Emerson said just a while ago. The fact that neuroscience has also come into play in this world of multilingualism that we live in. And so it has been shown that if in fact you are multilingual, the onset of Alzheimer's, if you tend to have that gene, is delayed by about 4 years. So there are many, many benefits of being bilingual. I try to really emphasize the more social ones over time. So yes, you seem to have a firm grasp of what assessment is all about, but it's really different from testing. So I just wanted to take a minute and compare the two constructs. So testing is often imposed upon you. It's external to what happens every day. It's distal, what we say, to the classroom. Whereas assessment is very internal. It's interwoven into instruction. Testing, in large part, is tied to either school-wide or even federal, depending where you're from, accountability systems. Whereas the primary purpose for assessment, hopefully, is to improve teaching and learning. In testing, someone said it, I put it in the chat. It's a behavior that you're trying to measure at one point in time, done. It's a snapshot. Versus assessment can be considered being, it's a video. It's a series of performances or projects or products that our students are able to show their learning. So assessment and testing are two different things. To me, the strongest distinction is testing usually results in a score, a number, a letter. What in the world does it mean? How is a 3 different from a 6? Tell me, what more does a person who gets a 6 have than a 3? Or a scale score, 365 versus 367. Does that person know 2 points more? Not necessarily. Versus assessment, you really look at success criteria, descriptors as to what students can do and the extent to which they're able to meet these goals for learning. So to me, the two are related, and testing folds into assessment, but assessment is much larger in scope. So to reiterate, classroom assessment oftentimes is indistinguishable from instruction. And so I want you to come to understand that what we did before in our first hour, that the students' languages and cultural portraits that they're bringing to school provide you with the context for beginning to plan and enact assessment. And it also provides a lens for helping you interpret what the students can do through assessment. This would be my definition of assessment. I consider it, whereas testing is one point in time, assessment is recurring, it's iterative, it's a cycle, it's a process that centers on our multilingual learners. And it entails purposeful, intentional planning, collecting, analyzing, interpreting, and reporting of information. But it's just not to give a number or a score or a letter. It's going to lead to taking action. And you're going to see a wonderful example in just a couple of minutes. So if you go to the next slide, here is that cycle. So if you look at number 1, hopefully you're not doing this by yourself, but in conjunction with a grade level team, a professional learning community, your entire school, even just with another teacher, you're starting to plan assessment. And since the topic is looking at multilingualism, it provides opportunities for you as a teacher and your multilingual learners to be able to access multiple languages. In number 2, after you have a plan, you're going to start to collect information and organize it according to a goal or a learning target. And number 3, now that you have the information, you have to make sense out of it. So you're going to interpret it in light of your multilingual learners. Think about each of their portraits, the child who's coming from Korea versus a child who was born and raised in Guam, let's say. And what can you do to provide feedback to each and every one of your students that is personalized, that will help move their learning forward? In 4, part of assessment is this evaluation where you're putting some judgment on how well the students have done, and you're reporting this information, but you're going to substantiate it. Again, it isn't just a letter or well done or a happy face, but something that the students can take, and number 5, use it to improve their own learning. So they know what they have to do next. So they know where they are, where they're going to go, and the steps they need along the way. So that makes it a whole cycle. And then the students are integrally involved. They're in the center of this cycle. You're thinking about them, they are participating, and an assessment engages multiple stakeholders. You can bring in the family members, you can bring in other teachers, you can bring in elders, you can bring in experiences that the students have had that will jumpstart the whole teaching and learning process, in which assessment will be embedded. So, to me, this slide is near and dear. Because for a long, long time, we thought if we treated everyone the same, everyone had the same opportunities, everyone had access to the same resources, everyone was given the same supports, everyone would just do fine. Well, no, think about what we did. Everyone has an individual portrait. So some would do better than others. You have to individualize instruction and individualized assessment. So what is equal is not equitable. When you think about how each and every one of your students will be able to thrive in your classroom, and you are providing them with equitable access and opportunities to engage in that learning, then they will be able to show you what they can do. So it's really the personalization of assessment, as well as, and it goes in tandem with instruction, that will ensure that each and every child can succeed. So here's a checklist of 15 items that really couches assessment within the context of linguistic and cultural sustainability. And so if you have an opportunity, can you go into the chat and download it and take a peek at it? Let's see. So this checklist reiterates many of the points we've already talked about, but it codifies for you what does it mean to be linguistically and culturally responsive, and how can we sustain that over time, not only in instruction, but also assessment. So you see now what you do every day in instruction is also a function of assessment. So if you have a chance, take a look. I'm going to give you an example. Here's 15, and we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time in it. But for example, if you read through it, I want you to pick one of these 15 items that resonates with you and place it in a chat. And then what we're going to do is hopefully we'll have 1 or 2 volunteers that will share how they are enacting assessment in their classroom in linguistically and culturally sustainable ways. So I read through it and I picked number 4. Okay, that really resonates with me because I think for a long time we thought assessment as testing had to be print dependent. It had to be multiple choice, or it wasn't assessment, or it had to be fill in the blank. But actually, instruction and assessment should show evidence of learning in multimodal ways. So remember, each child is an individual. Some learn better visually, some orally, some are inherent artists, some like to perform, some are very adept digitally. And so each one of your students should have an opportunity to choose which way to show they are learning. And to me, that multimodality is key in this day and age. It's no longer considered a scaffold. It's no longer a crutch, but it's integral to linguistic and cultural responsive teaching and learning. So your turn. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, right, Lynette? About 3 minutes, read through the list. And then at the end of 3 minutes, think about which of these 15 do you think is inherent in your teaching and learning? Hopefully you've all had a chance to read through the 15. And these are just 15 out of many ways in which you can be responsive in linguistically and culturally diverse ways. Did you pick out one? So put it in the chat now. And there's no one right answer, just so you know. Which one really calls attention to you? So Emily is saying number 3 because in her world language classrooms, many comprehensible input strategies are based on students' lived experiences. And if you don't have these student portraits, you won't know their lived experiences. So that's why we started off with, you have to know your students. You have to understand each and every one of them in order to better assess. But the rest of you, 5 and 4 and 12, there's no 11 and 12. All right. Do 1 or 2 of you want to explain what you've done in your classroom or in your setting that exemplifies one of these items? Lynette, should they raise their hand? Or what's the best way to go about this?
They can just unmute their mics.
Okay, that's a good way.
Any volunteers to share what they wrote? We would like to ask 1 or 2 people to share out what they think.
I will share something I did in my classroom.
Wonderful.
This is Roberta from Guam. And I had picked number 9. Students collaborate and have opportunities to respectfully share their opinions. And I used something that came from a Rel Pacific activity on focusing on the family, where we did the iceberg of culture. And I had the students get into groups depending on their backgrounds. So I had students from 4 different island nations or from 4 different locations, and they picked one of the concepts on the iceberg, and then they had to share how that was shown inside their own culture. And what I thought was interesting is that I had a couple of students who have lived in Guam most of their life, but they had to go and ask one another, how did our family do this? Because they had started to lose some of their cultural background. But at least they were able to move quickly to another group and ask, what do we do? How do we do this? What is it I'm supposed to be saying? And then go back to their group to share. So it was really very valuable for everybody to see how they were the same, and yet how their differences help to enrich themselves and their group. Thank you.
It was an excellent example of collaboration and sharing. One more? Someone's asking, can we share the checklist? Absolutely, have fun.
I would like to share. So what I selected was that the students' interest, number 15, are integrated into content and language learning. And I feel that this is a really critical piece, especially when planning, when teachers are planning their lessons, to really consider students' interests, because it's the students who will be experiencing or going through those lessons. And if a student is not interested, then you know that they will not be focused and engaged in the activities. And so I think that is critical. So just from me, thank you.
So I hope you'll all use this checklist and think about how to involve the students more, how to engage them so they feel validated. And I think Miss Lisa, you're up.
All right, so what are examples of linguistic and cultural bias in assessment? An example of linguistic and cultural bias in the assessment is the assumption of students being exposed to the life in the mainland or beyond our islands here. One good example is the word subway. When students hear the word subway, they relate to Subway restaurant or Subway sandwiches. So when it comes to taking the test, although they may know how to read, they will miss the part of the test because it is not relevant. Another good example is seeing a picture of an igloo on the test. Students are puzzled because not only that they are not exposed to that kind of home, they are also not exposed to the different seasons. Here in the Marianas, we only have 2 seasons. It's either wet season or dry season. And so they do not make that connectivity. And then now I turn it over to Miss Lisa.
So we do understand that as teachers, we are supposed to expose students to new things. However, if we are teaching what is on the test, then we are not teaching for learning, but teaching for testing, which really takes away the fun in learning.
Very well said. We know that there's constraints to testing. And what has to happen is that we must interpret the results of testing in light of each child's portrait. Don't forget that part. So now we're going to turn to 3 approaches that center on persons who are engaged in the assessment, because if you look to the next slide, our multilingual learners are in the center, okay? There's takeaways here. And I'm gonna go back to something that someone had put in the chat before. and they equated assessment with formative and summative to meet purposes. I don't use those terms. You'll see that this triad centers on students and learning. It doesn't center on the time it happens. And I think it's more critical that we really focus on who is the recipient, who is engaged in this assessment, rather than how often it occurs. And the other thing I want to mention is that these prepositions help to denote the relationship amongst the persons who are engaged in the learning. And so it's a whole new perspective on how to look at assessment through the eyes of our multilingual learners. And Ms. Lee is now going to give you an example of what project-based learning looks like and how assessment as for and of learning can unfold.
All right, so that's my class right there. You see some of my students, some of them are still working on their piñata. So here at Cagnan Elementary School, we have been doing project-based learning for the past 3 years. This school year, we have the school level project-based quarterly market day. With this market day planning, students have the first-hand experience of what it is like to be a producer and a consumer. So at the beginning of each quarter, students will brainstorm on products they wish to make and sell based on their preference and who are their audience, who are the customers, who's buying their products. And also, in addition to the producing and the consuming part, we have the upper grade levels, which is the 4th grade students. Their task is to create a survey for students to make decision on the kind of celebration to have at the end of the school year. So at the end of the school year, we have the celebration. And the celebration that our students decided to do this school year is to go on a field trip down to the movie theater and watch a movie. And the 5th grade students are the ones in charge of calling up the top vendors that were selected by the students. And their task is to inquire about the cost, the capacity the establishment can hold because of this pandemic, how much money do we need to generate, and how much money must every classroom generate in order for this event to happen. So our first success celebration for the summer was the Summer Splash Day. We, with the money we generated in the summer, we were able to rent 5 water slides and have free games and prizes for students. Now this school year, the students, the quarterly market day, the students get really motivated to learn and be able to apply what they have learned. And most especially, they're really eager to raise money because they really look forward to the end of the school year's huge celebration with the money that they generate during the market day. So that you see in the picture that they were supposed to sell the piñata. That would be $2 each. However, they wanted to bring home those piñatas, and they were supposed to bring them home this Friday. Unfortunately, last Friday, unfortunately, we have to switch over to remote, so the piñatas are still in the classroom. So they were begging and saying, Ms. Failing, may we please bring home our first piñata to share with the parents. So I'm like, okay, so we're not, and we had to vote whether we're going to have them bring home or sell it during our market day. So they decided to bring them home. All right, thank you.
Here you see students as decision makers. They decided what they wanted to do with the money that they earned from making the piñatas. Students were interacting with each other and making choices in constructing their piñatas. The process was student driven. They had voice and they had choice. And that's what assessment as learning is all about. It's centering on multilingual learners. And so I equate it with saying I can, because in assessment as learning, the students can say, I can reflect on my learning. I know what I learned. I can tell you, I can show you. I can discuss ideas. These children should be able to describe the piñata, for example. They can share information with their peers. I did this, what did you do? Or how do you do this better? They can problem solve with their peers. The teacher's there, but the teacher is a facilitator and a guide. So assessment as learning is something that is totally focused on the multilingual learner. And we haven't seen this before in the realm of assessment. And for me, it's critical. And I always start there with our students. So Ms. Lee, I think you're going to show an extended example based on your project.
Yes, assessment as learning. So this lesson here is integrated with all subjects: reading, writing, math, science, social studies, and science. The top 2 products the students decided to sell during our second quarter market day is the Domu Abubu that we sold in first quarter, which is punch balloon. And the other product that we will be selling would be the piñata. So after our students have decided to work on the piñata, then that's when we challenged them. They went online and searched up on the best and the cheapest way to make piñata. And after that, they're in the picture. You see them. They are measuring the box. So that's when they have all the materials already. That's the following day after searching up. The following day, they do the application part. You can tell that they measured the box using the ruler, and they're measuring the streamers for the piñata, and the goal there is for them to measure the box and be able to cover the box entirely. We had few students though that were short on their measurement and had to come up with a solution on what to do next. And then I had to go back and remind them again that the task is for them to cover the box entirely, the recycled box entirely with the tissue paper, the streamers, and using the right measurement. And to be able also to say the shapes, the colors, the measurements in Chamorro, like quadral. So when I point to the side of the piñata there, you will see there's a square part there, and then I'll point to that, and I'm like, half in a figura, and they're like, quadral, and then I'll point to the other side of the piñata, and I'll be like, half in a figura, and they'll say what shape is, and they'll reply back, rectangular. And I continued on with asking them the colors in Chamorro, and they were able to answer them, identifying the colors they have used. Okay, so that is the assessment as learning.
And you saw how learning was the primary objective and assessment was infused into it. And it was a natural extension of instruction. It wasn't, oh, it's Friday, we're going to take a test now on the colors and lengths. But it was a very natural situation for the students. And they had choices along the way. So in the second approach is assessment for learning. And this is where multilingual learners partner with teachers or with other adults. As Ms. Lee just said, that they could use their family members as resources and go and ask them questions to research that topic. And I would hope that they would get feedback not only from Ms. Lee, their teacher, but from their family members. And they take that feedback and they make corrective action. And in doing that, they are building their own knowledge base. The other thing is part of assessment for learning is that they're creating these relationships, partnerships between students and teachers and families, and connecting the home to school and school back to the community. And it's the positive feedback. It's what they can do that's going to push or move their learning forward towards the goal. So assessment here, as in assessment as learning, it's really indistinguishable from what they are doing. One of the negotiating points in this is that students have a say in crafting goals for learning with their teachers and to decide how they're going to show their evidence. So in this way, it was done on a one-to-one, desk-to-desk, where each child get to speak to their piñata. But other times with older students, they may create a portfolio of their learning products. Or at the end of a quarter, there's a student-led conference where students are able to show evidence of their learning. So the questions that come to bear is that assessment for learning is what you can do with some kind of facilitation or guidance from an adult. And so Miss Lisa, whose turn is this? Just jump right in and tell us what you did with assessment for learning.
All right. So before we play the video, this one is the assessment for learning. This video you're about to see is our morning routine. Students would do their morning message by saying the day, the date. They also do the social and emotional learning. They recite the alphabet and the shapes in Chamorro. Please know that at the beginning of, and this is their first, at the beginning of the school year, the students in this Chamorro immersion class speak minimal to no Chamorro. And and this is actually their first year in the immersion class. And let's see what we have here. And then after that, I'll just say something about it real quick. Thank you.
Buenos días, estudiante. Buenos días, señor Pangelinan. Tagi hulu. Uno, dos, tres. Bersama dia sa Oktober dia 27 2021. Talam Bray. Bersama dia sa Oktober dia 27 2021. Hafasin na tatamu. Hafasin na tatamu. Hafasin na tatamu. Pergi lalu lalu. Pergi lalu lalu. Zaza zazu malau. Zaza zazu malau. Hafasin na tatamu. Hafasin na tatamu. Margo sa Hafa. Tahu na sekolah. Senmale. Melon, oval. At the melon. Oval. At the melon. I say start.
So immediately after the lesson, we go over the words that needed some corrections. Like one word that really we kind of go over is the aridondo. So when they say the word, they used to say aridondo, Ari, don't do, like, the letter R, we drag our tongue. And then I'll be like, no, you gotta say, Ari, don't do. And they were like, Ari, don't do. And so really, they laugh, and then they try to come up with that. And so the next time around, they are able to say the word correctly. Thank you.
What I find so interesting in this example is that Miss Lee has guided them. And so it started off as assessment for learning, but over time it's going to become assessment as learning as the students themselves become the leaders of assessment. So that's what's so exciting for me to see, even in these young children. So the last approach in this triad is assessment of learning. So in this case, the educators themselves get together and they think about the projects, they think about the performances, they think about how students can demonstrate what they have learned, how the students will know that the goal has been achieved. So what particular is the evidence? So when Ms. Lee was thinking about this piñata project, she might have said, all right, I have a 3-part goal. I want the students to be able to describe their piñata, to explain how it was made, what are the steps, and then tell the reasons why. So why are we acting on piñatas? What is the ultimate action we're going to take? We want to make money so we can go to see a picture show. What is very interesting here is we make it a we can statement. So educators really formulate the ideas, but they have input. Just as Ms. Lee said before, maybe they wanted, how did they want to use the money that they will be able to get from selling their piñatas? What is key to assessment of learning is that there have been set up some criteria of success, either project descriptors or a checklist or a rating scale or even a fancy rubric of sorts. And students, along with the teachers, are able to think about where the students are on their own continuum of learning. And that's the second part. To what extent are the learning goals been met? So it's assessment of learning, not only for the students to know, but also for the teachers. How well have the students performed? And how can we use this information to create our next project? Ms. Lee?
All right. So assessment for learning. The assessment for learning is, as you can see there in the picture, students are always included in the planning, from what product to make, what materials are needed, can we access the material, how much money do we need to use to be able to purchase the materials that we need, and the importance of learning about measurement, and also to be able to apply the measuring concept outside the classroom. They are also able to share some problems and solutions they encountered when they were working on the project, such as not measuring correctly, putting too much glue, using more materials than expected, and what are they going to do differently the next time around, because we have about 30 more piñatas to make. And so one of the students that was given the whole material for the entire piñata used up the whole streamer on just one side of the piñata. And so she was like, I need more materials. And I looked at her, I'm like, you used up everything. And then she was like, and then I'm like, okay, so the steps up on the board says that you're supposed to give it half an inch. And so we went back and then I kind of modeled it out, and okay, next time around, you're going to do it differently. And that way you will have enough material for your next piñata. Okay, and that is assessment of learning. Thank you.
Many of you submitted some questions when you registered for the webinar, and many of them referred specifically to assessment in multiple languages. So the last couple of minutes, I really want to address kind of the why, the what, and the how behind assessment in multiple languages. And hopefully everything what we've done so far will come together. And you will see why it is so critical that multilingual learners don't have to be assessed in multiple languages per se, but they have to have access to that assessment in multiple languages. And if you read through, we just have a couple minutes, so I think I'm just going to do some reading. The first one is that every multilingual learner's identity is tied to multiple languages and cultures. We decided that when we were able to share our students' portraits. If they have voice and choice, they will become agents of their own learning. And if their voice and choice is reflective of their home environments, they're going to be influenced by other languages and cultures. And then finally, their full linguistic repertoires, that means their own idiolects, what they're bringing, their lived experiences, their exposure to other languages and cultures are very much tied to who they are. And so they should have that opportunity to assess in multiple languages and to see how all their languages and cultures converge in the classroom. They're not separated, but that's who they are. So that's kind of the rationale for assessment in multiple languages. If we go to the what might we do to kind of facilitate assessment in multiple languages? The first thing you should do is when you formulate learning targets, I use the word target in lieu of objectives because you enact learning. It is an objectify. What you should think about is how to secure input from your multilingual learners, and that you have to be flexible to allow for your students to pursue and show their learning in multiple ways. As I said before, through multiple modalities, and language is a mode of communication. So if they choose to do something in a language other than English, celebrate that. What are you measuring? Are you measuring a concept or the language? If it's a language, that's one thing, but if you're measuring mathematical, shapes, maybe it doesn't have to be. The second point is the multilingual learners have opportunities to explore resources in multiple languages. That isn't so true with the young students, but for older students, when they are more multilingual, they can seek videos in languages other than English, or to pursue writing down interview questions that they want to ask. They can create their own iMovies in multiple languages. What's really important in the what, though, is that you spell out those success criteria. So there is provisions for use of multiple languages. You don't have to stipulate. Again, that should be a student's choice, but you allow them that opportunity. It's one of their options. So finally, the how. And I'm going to go back to the point that assessment is a social activity, just like learning is, that involves different stakeholders. So the how is, one, for leadership teams, maybe at a school level, they need to craft a language and assessment policy. When is it appropriate to bring in multiple languages and cultures? When are we going to celebrate it? When are we going to invite elders? How can they become engaged? How are we going to craft multilingual, multicultural curricular units of learning so language and culture is very much steeped in that unit? It isn't something on the side that you have to address, but the unit itself comes from linguistic and cultural experiences of the students. Teachers all the time should engage in elders in sharing their funds of knowledge, bringing them to the table. Teachers know that research. How can you put it into practice each and every day? in multiple languages. And finally, your students. Multilingual learners should have those opportunities to think about, to interact with their peers. And think about it, you have to be strategic as a teacher when you're facilitating this. You're going to have peers of the same partner language, obviously. But just as important, they should know that evidence of learning doesn't have to be an isolating event where one language is distinguished from another. But again, if they are showing you what they know and can they do it in multiple languages? Again, that is a joint decision that you and your students will make together. So hopefully the value of multilingualism, multiculturalism in educating our multilingual learners has become crystal clear over these last couple hours. And I hope that assessment in multiple languages can become the vehicle for all of your students to show their strengths, to be able to illuminate their assets, and to be able to have pride in all their accomplishments. We just have a couple of minutes. Miss Lynette, do you want to jump in now?
Yes, all right. So at this point, we would like to ask if there are any specific questions that our participants have that they would like to ask Margo or any of our speakers or even our audience. And so we would like to provide this opportunity. We have a couple more minutes that we can where we can focus on some questions. So,
Hi, this is Emily. Can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
I know, nice to see you again, Margo. Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you to Lee and Lisa for the wonderful sharing. So in the context of Hawaii, there are teachers who would like to engage in multilingual, multicultural practices to support the multilingual learners. But there are also situations where the teachers might not share the same languages. So I wanted to ask, what strategies might you have for these teachers to try out assessment in multiple languages when they don't have the same knowledge?
That's where you can rely on elders. You can rely on the community. You can rely on your administrators to bring in, for example, have a all school literacy event where you're highlighting or showcasing multiple languages. So everyone gets a sense of their own portraits, and so they'll know who to turn to and who to use as a resource.
Mahalo,
and to
thank
celebrate that, have a language resource bank available.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Can I share something that one of our teachers is also doing here?
Sure.
So she wanted to learn the greetings in Carolinian. What she does is she assigned it as a homework for the students. So they go back home and they ask their parents or the elders how to greet in the Carolinian language and even the numbers. So they tap into their home, the people, the community. Thank you.
And their elders become their mentors. I mean, so it really becomes a reciprocal relationship where they're learning from each other.
All right. Any other questions? We can possibly take one more. If none, that is fine too. All right. So let's go ahead and move on. But we also want to let you know that if you have any other questions, we will have our information, our email addresses at the end of this slide deck, and you can contact us via email anytime. All right. All right. So as promised at the beginning, I indicated that we will be raffling off 5 sets of the recent books that Margo published. And so one of it is called Assessment in Multiple Languages, a handbook for school administrator, for school and district leaders. And then the other book is Classroom Assessment in Multiple Languages, a handbook for teachers. And so we are going to be, I'm going to place all of our names who are here today, who stayed throughout the webinar, and we are going to be raffling off, and I will be emailing you to ask for your post office address so that we can mail the books to you. So good luck to everybody. I want to make sure that I shared that with you. And we have a participant feedback form. And so Ms. Paulina is going to be putting the link for the feedback form in the chat box. And we would like to ask you to please take some time to fill it out, as we do use the information for improving our practice. And so, you know, like we hear all the time, practice makes perfect. And so we continue to practice, and we also use the data to improve. So in advance, thank you so much for filling it out. And then quickly, just some references cited that is there as well on the list. And here is where we have our contact information for Dr. Gottlieb, Ms. Lee Pangelinan, Ms. Lisa, myself, Ms. Paulina, as well as our directors for Region 18 and 19. So please contact any of us with any questions, or even a comment about the webinar and how you enjoyed it and what you learned. Okay, so we want to thank you for your participation again. I want to thank our presenters, Dr. Margo Gottlieb, for taking the time out of her very, very busy schedule to plan this event for you all, as well as to, and you know, what made it a little bit more challenging for us is that we are all in different time zones. And so we have to get together, some of us late at night and some of us early in the morning. And so we really wanted to make sure we planned this well for you and provided you with some examples from the Pacific as well. And hopefully these will resonate with you, and that you'll be able to share it with your colleagues and with your staff as well. So thank you so much for your participation, and thank you to our presenters. And with this, I would like to say, Sizus Ma'asi, Zan adios. This concludes our webinar. Any last thoughts from our speakers before we end?
Lynette, can I just add something?
Yes, please, Paulina.
Yeah, this is regarding the images and videos we use in this presentation. We just want to inform participants that yes, we did get parental permissions to use their children's images or videos. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That's really important. I also want to share that the presentation as well as the recording of the webinar will be posted on our Region 18 and Region 19 websites. I am also going to be emailing it to all of our participants who have registered for the webinar. And so you receive that. Good luck to whoever will be winning the great books, great resources, and we will contact you shortly. So thank you again, and have an awesome evening, afternoon, morning. God bless everybody. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.